It's Thursday, December 18th, and the entire eastern U.S. is in for some pretty nasty weather today. We have a couple of areas which are severe risk warned by the Storm Prediction Center, and these are mostly going to be for a wind threat with a 5% chance. We're going to have a pretty nasty squall moving through this larger one out here near the kind of the triple or quadruple point for Tennessee, Arkansas, Missouri, Kentucky. Then we have a little one out here in the Outer Banks in North Carolina. And we actually also have a bit of a tornado risk, which I think is going to be the largest down here in the kind of Mississippi, Alabama tornado corridor. Then also we could see a nocturnal threat out here once again in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. So yeah, let's get right into it. So this is what we're looking at right now across the US. This is live radar as I'm recording this at 1 p.m. today. And this is pretty much unfolding exactly how we thought it would. We have our big squall, which is back here near Springfield, Illinois right now. And this is going to only evolve as we go into the day, kind of increasing in strength, but it is already severe warned in a couple of parts. This is going to continue to push eastward across the US, and we have multiple lines of confluence and just messy convection across the United States today, as there is a very powerful trough moving through with a couple of prefrontal troughs as well. But this is pretty much evolving exactly how we thought it would. So really, if you're in those severe warned areas, definitely still expect to see that severe weather downstream. And if you're not, if you're still even in that green shaded area, I think you're going to be seeing some pretty nasty thunderstormy weather today also. But starting in our main risk area today, which I think is going to see a lot of the bulk of the damage come from some damaging winds today and this very strong squall. We can see that it's actually a pretty skinny squall line, which is something that's pretty characteristic when we see a strong, fast-moving cold front. We see a really skinny but powerful squall. So the weather won't last super long. Definitely do think we could see those strong winds prolonged a little bit more, as we do have flow directly into the back of these storms. So that could be a factor as well. But this is going to continue to move eastward, probably reaching the Mississippi River by around 4 p.m. today Eastern time, and then it will only increase in strength, I think, as we go into the afternoon. It's really going to peak in intensity probably around the almost Mayfield, Kentucky area, and then as we move kind of halfway between Memphis and Nashville. I think Nashville is going to be in for some pretty nasty weather today, but as the night falls, we're going to see two things happen. We're going to see these frontal storms, these prefrontal storms, which is kind of initiated by a prefrontal trough and big confluence line, crash into the main line. That's going to momentarily make these storms a little bit stronger. Then also the low-level jet is going to kick in, just providing better shear parameters and thus more fuel for these storms. So I think these storms are going to be their strongest, stretching from this corridor between kind of Indianapolis all the way down to probably Tuscaloosa, Alabama, around the nightfall or evening hours today. And then this line is actually going to last pretty far into the night hours. Now, we're not going to see as much messy convection in front of it as we will after night falls. As we can see, it's a little bit clearer here, which could mean that these storms might actually be able to last a little bit longer because there's not as much in front of them eating kind of up that energy. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. They can last probably all the way up until around 3 to 4 a.m. Eastern. Now, moving to our southeastern sector, this is going to give us a much better look at that tornado risk in the Alabama, Mississippi kind of tornado corridor. And we can see that these storms in front of them, the main thing with them is that they're still going to be attached to that big confluence band, but they're also going to have an area of much better shear as a trough kind of digs in. Our jet max will actually dig in at around probably 3 p.m., which will help to initiate a lot of these storms. And also, they're a lot more discreet than this really messy squall. So coupled with not really having anything in front of them impeding their inflow, and then also not being attached to the squall, being a lot more discreet and still having all those shear parameters, I think we could actually see definitely a couple of tornado warnings probably around the Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, and even Huntsville area around the evening hours. That's also going to have the low-level jet coupled with those storms. But moving away from that, there are still a couple more areas which I want to look at. I think around the Florida Panhandle and then the Alabama-Georgia border, there's just going to be a lot of messy thunderstorm activity. I don't think this is going to be severe, but we do see a pretty strong band of confluence, which is going to push eastward. And this is going to be the main thing, which is going to bring that nocturnal threat in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Now let's switch over to that sector really quickly. And right here, we can see that we're having quite a few rotating storms off the coast of the Atlantic, probably around just after nightfall, around the 10 p.m. hours. Then we can see that line really start to move through the North Carolina area. I think this is unfortunately going to be a nocturnal threat of tornadoes. It is going to be some really messy convection, though, right there. Not sure if we'll actually see any come on shore, but I think we can expect loads of water spouts. And this is the big weather causer right here. We see that we have just a very strong trough digging in. One of the main reasons why we're seeing that really big squall line, also coupled with that fast moving and strong cold front. We have our cold core low pressure center also going to have a warm front kind of stretching across that main severe warned area. One of the reasons why this area right here has been severe warned, in fact, then we're actually going to want to watch this jet max. This little purple piece is going to kind of eject into that Alabama Mississippi corridor. There it is right there, right around when we're kind of expecting to see it peak in tornado time. So one of the other reasons why I think we could actually have a larger tornado risk than kind of painted by the Storm Prediction Center, although that's going to be hindered by the amount of instability out there. Not a whole lot of it. And then also we can see that we have a couple of prefrontal troughs and then just a lot of areas of confluence in front of it. That's why we're seeing all of this messy convection pretty much everywhere in the east today. I think can expect to see some sort of storms. Now, moving to our little bit more in-depth analysis, first things first, we're going to be looking at our parameters in front of the main squall, which is going to mostly bring that damaging wind threat. I don't really think that threat for tornadoes is going to be there, maybe when the low jet kicks in, but I think that risk in our main squall is going to be close to zero. The main thing with it, though, is that these shear parameters are going to be super duper strong around this time, and this is just going to bring very good parameters for producing strong damaging winds. Now, moving to our tornado risk area and that Mississippi, Alabama tornado corridor, the main thing that we're seeing here is, once again, super duper good shear parameters close to the surface. We actually even see a nice little curvature in our photograph. And also we see nice moisture, and these storms are going to be definitely very surface based. Now, the one thing here which is going to hinder this is that there's not a whole lot of instability for these storms to work with. The only thing is that there's no storms in front of them impeding their inflow or kind of eating up that environment in front of it. So I think these storms are going to have the best environment and best potential to produce some tornadoes in that Mississippi, Alabama corridor. And last but not least, we're just going to take a quick peek at our Outer Banks tornado threat, which is going to be mostly caused by a line of confluence moving through in the night hours. A couple main things to look at here: super duper good shear parameters, big curve on our photograph, nice moisture. These storms are likely going to be surface based. And then also, once again, not that much instability. And we can actually see that this line, the green and red lines here, are pretty much touching. That's an indicator that there's not much instability there either. But once again, I think we could see a couple of spin ups here, maybe even a tornado warning in the Outer Banks, although it looked like a lot of these storms are going to be offshore from the models, but still definitely want to keep an eye out on this. And the last thing is just areas that we didn't touch on. It looks like we've pretty much got everything covered over here in the eastern U.S. If you're in the eastern U.S., the main thing today is expect rain and thunderstorms and nasty weather. Then, of course, something that we didn't talk about, but isn't going to be severe or strong, is just the typical kind of atmospheric river going on over here in the Pacific Northwest. Now, something that I also want to touch on is the snow that this system is going to bring. Once again, it has been very snowy up here in the Pacific Northwest over the past week. Even some areas in the higher elevations are even expecting to maybe touch the double digits in feet in snow, which is kind of wild. But we've already touched on that in the past couple of forecasts. But what I want to look at is more up here in the northern, central, and eastern U.S. Looks like we're going to have some blotches, probably mostly brought by lake effect snow, which could see a couple of areas maybe even reaching probably 10 inches or a foot in snow with some of this, and then a lot of flurries up just in the north in general over the next couple of days. Now, the very, very, very last thing I want to touch on is the temperatures that are going to be brought by this. One of the things that I've been mentioning over and over again is that this system is going to be in part brought by a very strong and sharp cold front. And of course, the weather behind this cold front is going to be quite frigid. If you are above this imaginary line that I'm drawing right now, which includes a lot of the Midwest and even up here up north, you probably could see temperatures or feels like temperatures touching zero. Now I'm going to draw another imaginary freezing line. This includes quite a bit of the Northeast, even down into upper parts of the Southeast, and then also a lot of the West as well. So a lot of the US over the next couple of days looks like it's going to be in freezing temperatures, or at least touch them. But something that we're going to notice after this cold front pushes through, we're going to get a nice big warm up. This is what the weather is going to look like tomorrow afternoon. And we can see that we have temperatures in the high 60s touching all the way up into even South Dakota. A lot of the Southeast is going to be spared from those cold temperatures, especially if you're in Texas and Florida and the desert Southwest, which isn't exactly Southeast, but just the southern US in general. And even up north, it looks like pretty much the entirety of the Northeast and Midwest is still going to be freezing, but everywhere else, we're going to see a nice warm up.